Howdy, no, wrong thing. Already watching the start of this show. Welcome y'all to the what the fuck? Woof. Where'd that come from? Got an echo going on. Welcome to Gablash, y'all. The show I decided where all my tech issues are going down. But yes, welcome to Gablash. This is gonna be it's a very experimental thing, all things considered. This is me trying out an old format we had here on WatchaMania once upon a time. It was actually the initial format of Talkade. It was really just I get on here, chat with y'all about wrestling. I got a few things that I want to talk about. I see it, you see it here in the title, but if there's something y'all want to talk about, just say so in chat. We'll get the conversation going. But yeah, put it at the start of the title because I think it's one of the things we got to dive into right away, and that is the AEW Collision concerns. You see, this past week, AEW Collision was announced by AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery as their new project. Effectively, AEW Saturday Nitro is going to be the case. So I can really just move this over here for myself. Need to get something sorted and notes out here. But yes, it's looking like AEW is without a headliner, specifically one named CM Punk. And yes, CM Punk is the topic of conversation across all wrestling podcasts, across all wrestling platforms, because the man cannot seem to stop drumming up some sort of attention on himself, be it intentionally or coincidentally. Now, an Instagram story has a little bit more intention behind it, but ultimately, alongside Randy Orton. Yes, alongside Randy Orton. We'll be getting into him in just a moment as well, because yeah, he's a big question mark in his own regard. But CM Punk was supposedly supposed to be like the name to headline Collision with, effectively to Collision what Hogan was to Nitro. And wow, comparing the two politician wise, it definitely feels like there's more comparison to be drawn from than one might realize, but that's speculation. I think that the situation with CM Punk is one that they need to make up their mind on very quickly. They need to decide if they are or are not going to move forward with Punk, and they also need to decide what they're going to do once Punk is no longer there. Because even if he comes back, plays nice, does everything he possibly can for what would be 2 to 3 years, however long his contract is or however long he wants to run, ultimately, CM Punk is not going to be the lifeblood of AEW forever. They are a name to boost sales in the kindest of ways. I say that because CM Punk, based on his personal issues, his temper tantrums, and all of the injuries that have plagued him. Well, I say all the two injuries that have plagued him in the last year of his career really makes it seem like Punk isn't going to be something for AEW to rely on in really any regard. I think Punk is still going to show him. You see, that's not entirely true, because Fightful Select initially reported that CM Punk was set to be a name put out there, a part of all of the Collision promotion, but last second, Warner Brothers Discovery had him pulled from all promotions, and they just missed one link, and that's how people caught on that he was indeed supposed to be a part of the announcement. But then, given this whole Brian Alvarez drama that he started stirring up, and this new situation regarding Ace Steel apparently being back with the company, it has created some uncertainty around his return. So I wouldn't say it's definitely not just third-party insiders. Straight from the source, in a way, is this come. And like I said, I think that this is something they need to try and move forward from in one way or another, because they can't sit here and harp on it. I mean, that's effectively the case, Evan. Yeah. Evan, might ask you a question. Thoughts on Impact picking up Mark Andrews, Flash Morgan Webster? That's actually a great shout, Craig. I feel like, I mean, I'm not too in tune with the Impact product as of right now, but I do think that they'd be a great addition to really any tag team division they could be added to. I mean, there's a few, obviously, like AEW's tag division. You know what? Actually, I think there's even a place for them in there nowadays. There's this, preconceived notion that AEW has this stacked beyond stacked tag team division. And in 2019 and 2020, that was true. But that's no longer the case, especially now when we got the trios title kind of eating off of the tag team division's plate, you could say. But Impact, absolutely. Because Impact, they're the product that can fit anybody onto their roster. They can fit those technical wrestlers. They can fit those supernatural characters. They can fit those old timers. They can fit that new school. Is that you on Rampage yesterday? Not on Rampage, but I did do my Rampage watch-along yesterday. The time it was broadcast, which was like 3.5 hours earlier than normal. Just to cover up somebody shoot on it. They say he will not be there just to cover up the fact they accidentally spoiled the return of the most talked about person in AEW right now. That might be true, Devin, but here's the thing with that is it's not AEW's decision to just, it's not like it was just all of AEW's promotion. They had to reach out to Warner Brothers and have them pull all of that. And that kind of steps on some toes. That's not something that is so easily done, especially frequently. So you really have to, I would say that'd be a bit of a risk on AEW's part to go out of their way to do. Not to mention, they would have to be the ones to provide all of these promotional posters. So that means CM Punk would be on it. Hey, Cam, how about? Talking about Warner Brothers. I get you. If it was a Warner Brothers issue, then that makes sense. It could be possibly a mistake on Warner Brothers' part. But the thing about that is this announcement was pre-announced. Tony Khan went full Tony Khan and announced that he was making an announcement, and the announcement was Collision, but there were missing details, like the location of the first show, which months ago was slated to be the United Center in Chicago, which is Punk country. So to all of a sudden have that be up in the air and not when it feels very much like they were setting up to either announce Punk or try to pull a first dance situation where they effectively say he's going to be there without ever directly saying it. And in this case, there was no such mention of Punk. And if it's in Chicago, it's Punk, not Chicago, no Punk. That's pretty much what it's coming down to, Devin. That's what a lot of aggregators have come to the conclusion of as well. But yes, hello, Cam. Welcome. You jump in the conversation. We're currently discussing Collision plans by and large, although Craig did bring up an interesting question of Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster being in the tag division of Impact. I think that they would probably be a good fit in any tag division, but Impact could probably use some more recognizable names just for the sake of getting more eyes on them, because they're a product that not enough people see. Do you think Sting and Darby will go in Collision in Sting's history with Nitro? Surely, right? I feel like that's something that would have to come about. I feel like when it comes to Collision, it's going to very much be the nostalgia act show in some regard. Maybe it won't be 20th century nostalgia acts like Sting all the time, but when you look at the headliners they have on there, it's CM Punk. Well, to be CM Punk, but they also have Miro. You have Bryan Danielson on the poster. You can easily bring over Mox. You can make that be the show where you have all of those big tier names for the sake of getting people to watch on a Saturday night, and have Dynamite still be your homegrown product with your homegrown talent. They would not just go to Chicago. That's exactly it, Evan. Because if they announced Chicago, but Punk wasn't able to come through, then that would create a big uproar. So there'd be no reason for them to announce Chicago if he wasn't going to be there for sure. And when Chicago was slated to be the first show's location, as far back as, say, March, when the trademark was filed, maybe it was February. I can't exactly remember when the trademark was filed. It was incorrectly filed as Collison. But Collision having their own world title? No, I don't think so, Devin. I think what they're doing here is the correct decision. If they're going to stick to a firm roster split, then have champions float, which is what they're going to do because they have 7 championships. It's already hard to divide considering the fact that, you know, you don't want to be in a position where you have to create like copycat titles. You don't want to have to create a second tag title, a second men's world title, a second women's world title even. And yes, you could just say the TBS title is or the TNT title is, but nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see them all of a sudden try and make a mid-card title count as something more. That's like that you see the WWE United States title earlier this year. They were trying to make it be the top title on Raw's brand, and it was not working. Sorry if I worded the incorrectly. Oh, gotcha. Okay, no worries. I see. Yes, Impact starting an interesting trend of Friday pay-per-views for the most part, or at least those are their like super cards rather than their pay-per-views. I know they still have like their big 4. Impact is definitely a very unique product. As someone who does not watch it but needs to get into it more, I urge more people to go out of their way to view it. The AEW All Class Championship. I don't know. AEW has enough titles right now. I firmly believe that AEW should not be introducing any more championships until it's a women's tag team championship, and they should not be introducing a women's tag team championship until they have a firmly established women's tag team division, one that demands the need of a tag team title. And there's been a few instances in the company's history where they've started to get to that point, but then they just kind of fizzled out, focus shifted, things changed for one reason or another. Until 2024. Be all class championship. What's until 2024? Apologies. Use the clarity there, friend. Also, quick question. In case anybody hasn't done so yet, please do drop a thumbs up on this video. It would be helpful very much. This is effectively a series premiere in the eyes of YouTube. So how good it does is really going to establish how much it's going to get pushed by YouTube in the future. So please do drop them thumbs up. Maybe drop a comment if you're watching on the VOD. Would very much appreciate that. As podcasting, this is a new world for me. It's a very new world for me. There's the Talkade podcast, but that was a very unique situation in the case that the notes heavily guided that. This is very much off the cuff in comparison. Maybe that's when they get a firm decision. Until 2024, Oh, I see what you're saying. They do this brand split until 2024. Get a firm decision. Well, I'm still not quite there. Clarity. If Punk returns, should he be eating muffins? You see, that's it, Craig, right? What feels really wrong about this, right, is AEW has a great habit of addressing the reality of the situation when it is undeniable, such as the case with this Punk situation. But unlike ever before, it seems like the plan is to bring Punk back and spite that. We're going to bring Punk back in a babyface role. And I firmly believe that's not what he should be doing right now. He has really soured his perspective in the eyes of the majority of the fans of this company that is very much thriving off of goodwill. So the more all of these pieces fall into place, the more details come to light, the more it feels like Punk is trying to politic to get his way. And that's what scares me, because I was one of the people who were, tearing up when Punk came out at First Dance. I was the one who was like, he's going to help us make this company be something, and he's here to be a part of it, not the head of it. And he's proven me wrong. Not only are they making us wait for the location, but they will not give us the dang release date for Fight for. They did give us the Devin. They did give us the fight. They gave us the. AEW didn't give us the date. It has been indirectly announced. June 27th is when it'll be coming out. I imagine they're going to say something official next week on AEW, probably on Dynamite. But yes, based on the retailers that Fightful is communicated with, they've come to understand that a lot of retailers have been slated for a late June release, right around the time of Forbidden Door, and then there was a date somewhere on a run sheet or a paper or something of that. Yeah. Do you think so, Devin? I don't know. Pro wrestling, my love for pro wrestling was really, reinvigorated by AEW, so I can't really resonate with that take, personally. But yes, when it comes to AEW, when it comes to AEW Saturday Night Collision, this is going to be a real test for AEW, considering this whole CM Punk situation. I really want to see like them make a decision one way or the other. That's really what I was trying to get to. That was the crux of my point, is CM Punk can't be the driving force of AEW, because as soon as they start doing that, they start falling into the traps that everybody for years said they would, but they have avoided. And that is, running off the big name as opposed to what their plans were. We're seemingly getting a roster split for the sake of satiating this man. This does not feel right in any way compared to how AEW has done things. But more or less. Oh yeah, and again, I just remembered what I wanted to make the point about him coming back as a babyface is it seems to be completely ignoring the reality of the situation surrounding it. Realistically, he will come out and he will get cheered in Chicago. He will be revered in Chicago even. Future venues, I think those boos will start to creep in. We'll get to a point where we have a very divided crowd whenever Punk is present. And this is all going to happen in a supposed feud with Samoa Joe. It was reported last week, again, by Fightful Select, subscribe to Fightful Select, that Samoa Joe is the front runner for Punk's return program. Punk, yeah, I know, I've just did the whole Fightful plug, but I mean, you should. It's a great news source. It really does help understand things at this level. But CM Punk apparently wants to work with Samoa Joe upon his return. And the thing about Samoa Joe is he is badass. If he is not in there with a firmly established and loved babyface, he's getting cheered more. And that's probably what's happening in that feud if CM Punk insists on coming back as a babyface. Now, if he comes back trying to creep in with some nuance, trying to feed off of the narrative that he actually is just this politicking asshole, and he can drop little hints and subtleties. He's a master on the mic in that regard. So time will tell if he's truly committed to just coming back and being the white meat babyface that he wants to portray himself as, or if he's going to come back and embrace the hate, I guess, as Kane 2012 would say. And continue the game conversation not to drive away from AEW, but WK24 was announced yesterday, so Fight Forever is still going to have. Well, here's the thing. It's not going to have some competition. They're both wrestling games that are going to be on the market. But first things first, WWE 2K24 probably isn't going to come out until October at the earliest. So that's 4 months away. Second of all, they're going to be promoting two very different types of games. One is a full wrestling simulator in the form of 2K24, and then one is going to be very much of an arcade simulation. Hello, Zoe. Welcome to Talkade. This isn't Talkade. This is Gablash. Although at this point, I feel like that might be a better name for the show. Do let me know what you think of the layout and stuff, y'all. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants with this one as I kind of land. I really had a rocky start. Put myself up in the wrong overlay and everything. But yes, I do think that the Gablash name. Thank you. I figured it's stuck somewhere in between clever and silly, so I figured that it's going to be seen as one or the other depending on who you ask. So where were we at? Yes, Collision. CM Punk, is he going to? Yes. Default babyface Samoa Joe. Yes. Thank you. That earlier message helps get me back on track. Because, yeah, that's where we're going to go with this. If CM Punk insists on coming back, and not for nothing, maybe that's the intent. And it could also have something to do with the fact that Samoa Joe is Ring of Honor television champion. Not to say he can't drop the title before June 17th, a month from now. But it looks like Ring of Honor is going to be filmed with Collision in the same way Rampage is filmed with Dynamite. So Ring of Honor will likely feature on AEW programming through Collision more often than not. Hopeful that the show is well received. I had to keep up with the upper third format, but I wanted to like not just be the straight AEW one like that it was before. Hey, Daro, welcome, fam. Nice to see you swinging by. I'm out here chatting AEW Collision at the moment. Mainly CM Punk's role in it and how much of one, if one at all, he'll have. And how the company will handle it if he doesn't have a role in it. But what's the payoff with the Samoa Joe CM Punk feud, right? That's my next question when it comes to that. CM Punk wins, move on, you know? Because you look at all of his feuds in AEW that happened beforehand. You can't even really call it Darby Allin one a feud, but that was more so just, that was a story of establishing Punk is back, he's got to come back, this is his comeback match. Then he kind of floated a little bit till the Eddie Kingston thing happened. And that was a little bit of a story, just like a 2-week story, very rooted in reality. That one really leaned into these behind-the-scene Punk issues that we know and love. I say know and love because you can find any damn wrestling-themed thumbnail on YouTube with CM Punk's face in it these days. Oh my gosh. So where do we, and then of course there was the MJF situation, and Punk came back to the Mox feud, took his little jab at Hangman. Now he's going to come back. He's not going to be touching anything having to do with the Elite, nothing having to do with the Blackpool Combat Club, seemingly because of what Mox has had to say about him. So what's next? So we're going to address Samoa Joe. Are we going to touch up on the Ring of Honor history with them? Maybe that's something worth doing, especially if Collision is going to be a pseudo crossover show. Seems that I was 3 minutes out. My bad. No worries, Zoe. That happens a lot of times. I've done that a few times on YouTube, and it sucks because you're like, oh man, there's no way to catch up without outright skipping something. But I appreciate it nonetheless. I've more so less been just kind of tripping over my words, trying to keep myself on track. Do you think the fact that being out during these 9 months, Punk being injured? That is a great question, Craig, because I think the answer is yes. And that's what we need to talk about next, actually. That's a great thing to bring up because not enough people are realizing that this is never going to be satisfying. Just short of Punk coming back and going right into a program with the Elite and talking about everything and laying it out there right in front of us to see, clean out the closet on live television. It's not going to be satisfying, and that's not what they're going to do. Even if they're on working terms, even if they've come to apologize in private and will eventually work together down the line in some way they'll find to make be organic within the sense of the programming. I think that a lot of the audience, because AEW has a very in tune audience in regards to the wrestling news and the behind the scenes situation. There are other casuals, but they have a very strong hardcore following. So a lot of people know what's up. A lot of people get it. A lot of people are in these situations like us having these conversations. So if they're not going to address that right from the get-go, it's going to leave a lot of people dissatisfied. And by the time they come around to it, people are going to blow it off. They'll catch it in some YouTube clips, and they'll be like, okay, cool, that's a thing. They're not going to fully capitalize on it. And whether that's due to personal beef, whether that's due to the plans they put in place, whether that's due to CM Punk trying last second to make sure he can have Ace Steel be his backup heavy in the locker room at the tapings, because he's back with the company, but not back at the venues. And that's why CM Punk's name was supposedly pulled. At least if you were to chain together the series of events that come from Collision's announcement to Punk going off on Instagram. So no, I don't think this hype can be realistically satisfied. And, well, let me rephrase that. This can't have a satisfying ending. Rather, maybe not even an ending, but it can't have that gratifying moment of this is what we sat here and waited for, because I don't think that's going to ever come. Okay, something that was said by several different podcasters, journalist aggregators, whoever you follow, something that was said right around the time of Brawl Out was, this is very likely this will remain a he said situation till the end of time, and we'll never truly know what happened, because there's legal ramifications surrounding this situation. Like, it's very likely that legally they aren't allowed to just simply pull each other to the side and go, hey, I'm sorry at this point, because legal action was taken back then, even if it's regretted now. So kind of hope the hint too little first. And then QTV comes out working the mark. You know it, Craig? That's actually genius. That's what QTV is there for. To get that absolute radiant heat for things like that. You know, people wanted MJF to do the whole coming out to Cult of Personality shtick. And he eventually did at their payoff match at Revolution. But they wanted him to do that on the night Punk was supposed to debut. And it's like, nah, you can't do that. But with QT, you absolutely can do that. And that would be one way to try and help get a pop behind Punk, because even people who hate Punk are going to be sitting there in the crowd waiting for him to come out. And if Cult of Personality hits, and they're sitting there waiting for it to come out, and QT walks out, even those people will be pissed, because they're like, man, I bought in. You know? And those are the kind of fans that hate to be worked. Unfortunately, pro wrestling suffers from that. They have a fan base that hates being worked, that hates being convinced of the product. And personally, I find that bizarre. Literally any media on the planet, any way you consume, the goal is to make people buy into it. So to have pro wrestling have a subsect of fans who inherently refuse to buy into anything just on the premise of saying they didn't buy into it, it will always damage, it will always damage plays like that. But I think we've steered a little far away from that topic. But yeah, more or less, I think, let's try and put a little bow on it. I think that the situation with Punk needs to be made up. There needs to be one final line drawn. If it's crossed, done. And yes, I'm just another talking head who's gotten on the internet and just been like, this is what they should do. This multimillionaire company who has people who are much more professionally trained to run it than I ever possibly could be. This is what I think they should do. But it's not for me to know the inner workings and how to make that work out. It's just for me to have the general concept in my mind. And it's not even my job to do that. That's just what I'm choosing to do. So AEW Collision, they need to decide, they need to firmly distinguish its identity and whether or not it's going to have Punk a part of it and move forward with that plan. Because that's when AEW is at its best, is when it has a plan and it's sticking to, well, when it has a plan that they're sticking to and people are buying into. Now, the fans can book shows better than most people in the business. Okay, you know what? Gibby's got some wise words in here. What's up, Gibby? Gibby coming out here with the facts. All right, everybody, get your fantasy bookets, write up your show, send them into Tony Khan. Guarantee you they're all better. But how goes it, fam? Nice to see you swinging on by. Trying to add a new little thing here. A little play at podcasting. See how that goes for me. And yes, I just would think it would be funny. Exactly, Craig. And honestly, what I love about QT's character is it really does put a lot of fans in the position of coming to grips with how they are. Specifically, those fans who have these insatiable expectations. And those who are in tune with the dirt sheets in the most cynical of ways and nothing else. I just book Bill and Satnam. All right, Big Bill Satnam 1 hour Iron Man match. I mean, I laugh, but Big Bill probably could actually hold his own in such a situation. Satnam, that's yet to be determined, but I'm optimistic based on the things I've seen of him. That table spot last week on Dynamite was bonkers. Just shoved. Specifically, the camera angle of watching this giant man descend to the ground from that height was awe-inspiring. You know, that would not, the same camera angle, the same spot would not have produced the same reaction if it was Jungle Boy getting shoved off like that. And that's not a knock at Jungle Boy. That's not a knock at smaller wrestlers. It's just because Satnam is such a spectacle by default. So yeah, I think that's wrapped up our collision talks. I say we move on to the other half of our thumbnail, another concern of ours, and that is one Randall Keith Orton. Specifically, the concerns about him ever returning to the ring. Okay, so it's as simple as this, right? A little over a year ago, went out for back surgery. That is really bad. The back surgery is the type of thing that ends athletic careers almost 100% of the time. So it's a heavy concern when it comes to, Randy, who has a finisher that has him taking a back bump every single time he hits it. So there is that element of it, and that's been straight up acknowledged. But basically what's been said by his father, Cowboy Bob Orton, in a recent interview or something of the sort, he acknowledged that Randy Orton has been advised by his doctors to not get back in the ring. And he's currently training. So that would imply that Randy Orton is going to defy that. But he has been told by WWE's doctors to not get back in the ring. Now, of course, these are WWE's doctors, the same people that kept Bryan out, who has since returned to pro wrestling 5 years ago in full form. And it's not slowed down, save for the one concussion incident last year and I suppose this year since the Iron Man match. But that's more so proven to be from an evil mastermind perspective. Now, with Randy Orton, you then have to ask the question, is it worth it for him to come back? Because obviously, from a fan perspective, if you like the man's work in any way, shape, or form, and you're like, oh man, don't want to see it end like this, let him come back and get some more strides in. But this is also the same man who about 2 years ago was telling us how he's been doing this for 2 decades and he'll do it for another one, and that wasn't in a promo, but that was something that was very real. And that was something that a lot of people believed. And even fans took pride in, because it's like, this really validated the way Randy Orton worked. Orton being, his career ending, what do you think will be his... Ooh, we'll get to that in just a moment, Craig, because I like that question. Thank you. You've had several great questions. You can step away. You would consider one of the all-time best of all time, and that's exactly it, Gibby. If this is it for Orton, you can put him in the Hall of Fame next year. Nobody will bat an eyelash, just like they did with Edge, who admittedly did not have as decorated of a career then as Orton does now. So there is nothing left to prove for him, except, flat out. There's nothing left for him to prove. But I understand the itch, the desire to come back, the desire to end on his own terms. We see it with Edge now. He did just that. And Orton is at a point where he's not going to be able to come back in 7 to 9 years after he feels great again. He's already, 43. He'll be pushing 50 then. And that's not to say 7 years is an absolute one. But it's a shaky situation, because one would think that he'd want to come back, have one more run, and then end it up. Others would think that he'd want to come back and prove what he said, go another decade. But would it be worth it? How risky is it for him to do? But that is a good question, Craig, and I don't want to get too far away from it. For Gibby, Randy is the guy that made the streak matter. Now, that's a great point. Just last night, in fact, on the Discord, in a little watch party we were doing, someone made the point that Randy Orton was the one who really started making the streak be the focus of Undertaker's WrestleMania feuds. And that was one of those first times there's like, oh, Taker could lose. Yeah, they really started that was when the streak became something to challenge as opposed to just something that was happenstance. Now, what do I think will be his defining legacy? I think it's going to be his first feud with John Cena. In 2007, when Randy Orton really got fished, specifically, when he went to John Cena's dad's house, when he beat him up, that was Edge. When he punt kicked John Cena's dad at ringside, things like that. Like that run, that's Orton's defining run. Orton at that point established, he began what was an establishing run as an all-time heel. Very few heels in the business, I feel like, have ever been as vicious and vindictive as he has been. You know, and it's one of those, and that's almost always why he turns face. He almost never turns face because of some act of virtue. Your phone died, you're back. Welcome back, Zoe. It was almost never an act of virtue that turned him face. It was almost always just, man, you're just so awesome and good at your job. We just want to cheer you. So they just had to stop having him be a little heelish for a little while. And then it came back, and then eventually it would be like, okay, they've cooled off. Time to fuck somebody up. Welcome, Rally. Nice to see you swinging by. Currently discussing Randy Orton's career and in retrospect, and whether or not it's worth it for him to try and continue from here on out. So yeah, I think that was an establishing run for Randy. You know, his authority run, that was great and stuff. But I think his I guess technically second WWE title run, because he was given the title at No Mercy 07, lost it 10 minutes later to Triple H, and then won it back from Triple H at the end of the night in a last man standing match. So it was his second run that he then held for like 7 months up until Backlash the following year, where he dropped it in a 4-way, funny enough, to Triple H. Randy Orton probably coming back, I hope. Thunder Rosa got back problems. Yes, you know, Thunder Rosa is in a similar situation, and not for nothing. She's younger, so that's almost more concerning in that regard. Randy Orton's been taking back bumps damn near nightly for over 20 years. One that he's imposed upon himself alongside every single bump he's taken, which admittedly is a reserved amount, you know. That's why he's so commended, is Randy Orton has such a less is more safe work rate that has still somehow carried him through top programs his entire career. Like, his entire career. Really, since late 03, he was in a featured program 100% of the time. So, he doesn't have anything to prove. He can retire and that be it. But I think a lot of people wouldn't want Randy Orton's last time on screen to be getting beat down by, like, the Bloodline or whatever it was. Although the last clip of him on screen is hilarious, as he's being walked out post beatdown and Bianca Belair's music hit and she comes out for entrance, and Randy Orton starts doing this little skip jump thing because he's being helped out by 2 referees, so he has the balance to do it. And it's just like, it's kind of cute in a way. It just reminds me of how much Randy Orton as an individual has grown, you know, like, that's definitely dad Randy Orton, you know. 2004 Randy Orton wouldn't be doing that little jive. But if he comes, so what I'm getting at is, if he comes back, I think it should be no more for than a year or two, less like a slower rate for working, you know, maybe 15 matches a year at most. And honestly, I still think that might be a lot. Like, almost, I'll even go as far as to say, bring him back on a part-time schedule. You know, Orton can afford to be a part-timer. And with his work rate, he doesn't sacrifice anything, because it's not, you know, back to Punk for a moment. I'm not trying to open that whole conversation again, but Punk has certain elements of his moveset that are dangerous to him. The suicide dive, dives of any kind, really. The one dive Orton had, which we were reminded of last night in our little watch party, was he did a diving crossbody. And he's cut that out of his moveset long since past. So I think he can manage a part-time schedule that'll carry him another 2-3 years. Retire on his own terms, provided nothing goes severely wrong, really wrong at all. And right off into the sunset. True as Dad said, Doc should retire. Surprise. You see, that's exactly it, Rally, is there is also the possibility that his father was working. You know, and it's a very small possibility. It's one you always have to consider, but it's a very small possibility. But ultimately, that's not something to tease around, you know? And I'm inclined to agree. When I see people like Jeff Hardy, one of my all-time favorites, like, being taped, bandaged up, and shipped out to the ring every other week, it's a little concerning. to see Randy Orton be training, despite the fact that he's been advised by doctors post back surgery to not wrestle again. Is he a part-timer like Brock? Yeah. And the thing is, he doesn't have as intense of a style as Brock, you know? Orton hits a snap DDT, that power slam, you know, like his moveset really is masterful in the way that less is more isn't just the philosophy for the moves he's doing, but for how much effort needs to be put into them. He makes things look so effortless because in a way he's set it up to be that way. Gibby, that's an incredible shout. So Gibby suggests here in the crowd, suggests here in the chat for those who may not read on the chat on the VOD or whatever, that he retires the RKO and goes on a huge babyface run, likely with a new finisher, I'd imagine, where he challenges for the World Heavyweight title and only uses the RKO to finally win. And that would lead an incredible pop. It would save him from taking these back bumps for the RKO every single time. And it would lead to an incredible payoff in a right off to the sunset kind of play. You now treat the RKO like this super finisher, which is really interesting in this day and age because the cutter has become a transition move, you know? But if Shawn Michaels came back tomorrow for a match, people are going to pop for that sweet chin music like he killed a man, you know? So I can fully get behind that. He can bring back the overdrive. That's what he used in 03, right? The overdrive gimmick. Bend him over, leg overhead, grab arm, spin him down. Yeah, Craig would pop hard for that. I knew he'd like that one. Well, that's exactly it. I think Gibby's onto something there. So yeah, time will tell if this is going to be good for Randy to come back and play it safe or even to just retire. There was a time where he was wheeling. He didn't do the RKO just because of how over. That's right. I do remember that. That was in the very forgettable 2010s era of WWE. But I ultimately remember. Wait, was that? Maybe I'm mixing it up. I maybe shouldn't have jumped to that conclusion. But ultimately, I think chef's kiss. Maybe Gibby was onto something about fans being better at booking. Well, that's over on that side of the pond where they can't decide who's booking the show one day or the other. Cough, Vince, cough. So, speaking of the world title, that's my final subject I wanted to discuss with y'all, and then we'll wrap up for the afternoon. And also, at the end, I'll discuss with y'all time slots. Maybe this won't be the permanent spot for the show, especially considering next week is Afternoon of Champions, which will be starting, which will be starting before this show would start. Yeah, I'm thinking I prefer that 3 p.m. over 1 p.m. at least. But for all I know, I can move it to Tuesday, 7 p.m. I can move it until tomorrow evening. Really just got to figure out what works best for everyone. So yes, the World Heavyweight Championship, the consolation prize, the I wasn't allowed to beat Roman Championship. I'll continue to call it Late Brunch of Champions, and you will be correct. Because that's quite frankly what it is. Especially if you're looking at it from the States perspective, because we have 4 different time zones, so it'll be anywhere from morning to afternoon for us, so you just call it Late Brunch, and you got yourself covered. So the World Heavyweight Championship was introduced because they did not want to beat Roman for his championships. They did not want to separate the 2 championships that Roman wields, and they need a world champion for Raw that isn't Roman Reigns. So I guess the idea was to create a 2nd/3rd world championship, depends on your perspective. And just to get my own personal thoughts about it, I hate it. I hate it so much because what this does is ruin things like lineage for myself, fans like me who love looking back and being like, oh wow, this title is 60 years old with over 110 different championship reigns. That doesn't exist anymore because it got fused into this 7-year-old world title that 3+ years of which have been spent in a single reign. So has me very salty that we are effectively in the position of having retired the WWE title, the one title in this company's history, this company that was founded in 1962 or 1952, I believe, maybe one or the other. And the only title that has yet to have been retired, suspended, otherwise inactive, is now inactive. And so that stings. That stings, that grinds my gears. And they can't take that away from Roman without taking away some of his accolades. Will Washington, formerly of Graph City, now of AEW Creative, has put it time and time again, great way, and that is you can't take away one of Roman's accolades. You have to take them all away. He has not been pinned in over 4 years. He has been Universal Champion for almost 1,000 days. He won the WWE title and unified it into the Universal title over a year ago. You can't take away the WWE title without all of a sudden damaging that mystique. You can't pin him in a non-title match without damaging that mystique. And you can't do anything that isn't all of those at once without damaging the opportunity there to capitalize. It's like how Japan ended their heavyweight title for that World Heavyweight. Exactly, Dara. This is a very New Japan move. And normally a New Japan move is a great move to make, but not that New Japan move. New Japan monkey paws, if you say. It's the San Martino Goldberg effect. In a way, yes, but it's that effect in an era where you need more than one world champion to represent more than one show that has its own established roster and billing. Back in the day in San Martino era and Goldberg's era, you wouldn't have an issue where you were trying to satiate two networks and treat them like equals with your programming, because if you did, then maybe things would have been different for either of their reigns. So, with that all being said, we need to create a new world championship for the sake of having a top guy presence. Now, I straight up asked in like a super chat or something on Grapsody one time, asking Will Washington, which is better, relinquishing the WWE title from Roman and putting it on Raw, or creating this World Heavyweight title? Said creating the World Heavyweight title because you don't damage Roman's mystique. Okay, so we don't, in a world where we're not damaging Roman's mystique, how hard is it going to be to establish this world title as mattering? And once Roman finally loses that title, what does the world title landscape look like? Do we then retire those championships that just becomes the Universal title and this the World Heavyweight title? Does that just become the WWE title and this the World Heavyweight title? Do we just say that's the Universal title and then we retroactively say that the World Heavyweight title is attached to the WWE title's lineage? Because then that's weird. Because then that's just kind of like immediately retconning the story you just told. And I know I'm going a mile a minute here. It's what happens when I get so worked up about these things. But I just don't know what the plan is. And the easy answer is there isn't one. There wasn't one when they unified the titles. And that most certainly is true. That was Vince going, how do we make this thing be bigger? Okay, this is how, then we do the thing. I think they already renamed it. Yeah, it's close. The undisputed WWE Universal Championship. But the thing is, they carry around these two titles. They carry around these two belts. They talk about two-belt Roman. They have very clearly remained vague, because then you go on to WWE.com, they're still listed as separate championships that Roman Reigns is the champion of both of. So WWE doesn't even know if they have relinquished the title or not. That is not a joke, okay? In the land of acronyms, professional wrestling, this is the Uwu Championship, okay? And they did it to themselves, and I will not stand for them trying to take that away from us, okay? But by that same token, they are both simultaneously treating it like one title and two titles, so that way at any point in time, they can just go back to it being two titles, because they've probably realized by now the error of their ways. There's no way it has not been brought to their attention, hey, you do realize, like, the 60-year championship is, like, kind of dead right now, right? Like, it's not so much dead as much as it's just, like, equipped to the Universal title, like this weird growth that the Universal title is sucking the life from. It can be theoretically separated and be its own individual again. For Yu-Gi-Oh fans, like, relinquished. The Universal title is relinquished, and the WWE Championship is the monster it decided to take in. That is a very niche reference. Kudos to anybody who got it. I think creating the title is the best call, honestly, because I don't consider it a constellation, but I was clearly with no. You know what? That is a good point, Gibby, because anybody who has been paying attention to the product, and I have been paying more attention to it than I have in the last year or so, since around WrestleMania, and that is that, I mean, because first off, they addressed it similar to in in the way they aren't doing with the CM Punk Scrum situation. They did do here in WWE, which is a very reverse role, a very strong reversing of roles there. But they straight up addressed the fact that this looks like a consolation prize by having Paul tear it down as such. But in the same token, we've had all of these top guys be like, no, this is a goal. This is a chance to change things. This is a chance to be a great thing, and we're going to do our damnedest. And they've gone out of their way to make it feel like a big goal. My one gripe is that they've made this brand-specific world championship be contested for in a dual-branded tournament. I'm remembering 1,000 Eyes thing. I was almost certain at least Craig would get it, because Craig shares my love for anime nerddom. We're creating the title. But it is. In hindsight, I agree with what Will Washington said. He has a great insight for these things. Dude was a wrestling podcaster for 18 years. Wrestling podcasting has been a thing for 19 years. Like that should put in perspective how well informed he is in his opinion. But not to stroke the guy off or anything, but just, you know, it was worth citing in the context of this conversation. And the World Heavyweight title can be a great thing, but it all depends on what they do after they crown the first world champion, which is the main points that I wanted to talk about. But all of that was to lead into this topic, to kind of set the stage, if you will. I wouldn't even say HH tore it down. He attempted to bury Roman and make it. You know what? That's a great. Well, at first, I don't quite agree that he attempted to bury Roman, because I mean, maybe it came off that was his intention, but that's not how it was executed. He pretty much, because the way it came off to me was he was like, "Oh man, Roman's such a top guy. He's just so good. Nobody can beat him." And now he's worked his way into a contract where he doesn't even have to defend the title all the time. You know, kind of respect it, because I'd do the same thing if I could. But anyways, we need a world champion, even if no one can beat him for his. So here's this. And I know I made that sound so much more consolation-y prize than even he did. I was a little bit more skewered in that one direction. That's not me trying to paint that image. It was more so just off the cuff trying to explain how it came off to me, and that was him saying Roman was so good we had to make another world title for the sake of other people having a chance to be a world champion. We're watching WWE, but the draft doesn't go into effect until after the... No, it actually went into effect after Backlash, and then they announced this tournament on the Raw after Backlash, so it completely defeated what they were going for almost immediately, and it kind of blew my mind that that was even what they did. Get going. Toasty in here. It's getting to that point in the afternoon, y'all. Apologies for me stirring around here. So I thought the tournament was dual. Yeah, you see, that would have made plenty of sense if they decided to say that was the case, because the whole thing is they did the draft for the sake of capitalizing off draft buzz because the NFL was doing their draft. But they very clearly have too many stories that require compromising this draft. So they either needed to do this draft and then say it doesn't go into effect until a month plus after we did it, or they need to go into effect right away and then immediately undermine it. And that's why they've done that. So it's kind of rough in that regard. But ultimately, if they get good programs surrounding this world title, once it's established, once we get a world champion, likely Seth in my opinion, although there's been reports of doubts about putting the title on him as of recent due to his little Captain America sighting. But I do think if they put the title on him, maybe have a great program with like a heel Drew, which I'm not sure they're going to do, considering Drew is very much setting himself up to be on his way out of the company. But there are people on Raw that he can defend that title against and have a solid program with in the process. And I say that, then I immediately try to think, and I'm like, well, who does that cover? Who would that be in reference? And that's me having a hard time remembering how they've established the brand split this far. Oh man, but I think I may actually have to look up the WWE roster now because I am completely drawing a blank. Yep, I pulled up WWE.com/superstars, and right here at the top it says WWE champions, and Roman Reigns' picture is there twice. Once as Universal Champion and once as WWE Champion. Make it make sense, WWE. So yeah, there's that. Oh yeah, for that matter, same thing with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn as the Raw Tag Team Champions and the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So those titles, they haven't really decided if they want to keep separate or not. Speaking of the championships, why haven't Brock switch their titles yet? You see, Dara, and that's it. Because they know for a fact everyone will be booing and hissing and frothing at the mouth the second they have to see these two ladies hand each other championships because of what happened with New Day and the Street Profits and what happened with Becky and Charlotte. And it undermines those championships so much and the lineage of them so much because Bianca's title reign, her 400+ day title reign, will come to an end because she'll hand the belt to another woman instead of losing it, like titles should typically be lost. So they aren't switching the belts because they know that's the case. However, they're probably in the position where they don't want to rename the titles, but they know that's the most logical situation. I myself have gone on record, like many others, you know, your Sean Ross Sapp, your Luke Owens, many other people in the wrestling podcast world have said, rename the titles, Women's World Championship, Women's Universal Championship. Hell, I even said it in Jesse's Discord, or in the Wrestle World Discord earlier. Bianca Belair, make her be the Women's Universal Champion. Rhea, the Women's World Champion. Maybe I got it backwards. The way I put it in the Discord is the way I meant. The key point is the WWE and the WWE. They separated the World Heavyweight as the World Heavyweight and the WWE title were previously unified. Yes, but you see, then by that logic, Craig, just to move back over to that, and that's not to like undermine your point, but to almost to enhance it even. Now they have immediately made this world title seem like a tertiary world title because you are breaking away a piece of a title that you unified into another title, you know? But that might be me also thinking about that from a too literally of a standpoint. Yeah. Horrible sentence, but you get my point. And fight for you, and that's why we have this new champion. Because Roman doesn't want to be here defending the title, and I would do the same thing back in the day, but it's not what you deserve. What you deserve is the fight. Yes, that's a very apt way of putting it. I mean, he did glorify Roman to a certain extent in it, but otherwise that's exactly how he put it out there. And so you got a good point in regards, like in that regard. To be fair, it was the WCW title and WWE. Yeah, no, you're not wrong, which sucks because that title, they're the ones who had the world title. That looked more like a world title than any belt they ever had. And that's not to undermine the things like the Winged Eagle belt and other things, but you see the big gold, and there is no more iconic wrestling belt design. Oh, anyways, I pulled up this roster. Oh yeah, they still have Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan listed as the women's tag team champions, but they were announced last night at SmackDown. The titles have been vacated. In 2 weeks' time on Raw, there will be a fatal 4-way to determine the new champions. Raquel will have a new partner in that situation. Spinner Devin. The spinner is the true world. Okay, so I'm pulling up Raw right now. I'm gonna look in who. Okay, Braun Strowman and Ricochet. That's right. They've come over to Raw. You can have that program fizzle. You can have their little tag team fizzle out into heel Braun challenging Seth for the world title. But then we have to run back that Seth Braun program. You know, remember Monster Slayer circa 2019, right before the whole Hell in a Cell debacle with Bray Wyatt. Yeah, that was a thing. Finn Balor, I suppose. He's right there. You could feud with Judgment Day in that regard. Seems to be my favorite phrase of the day. Scrolling down. Odyssey Jones. No, Odyssey Jones. Anyways, I got my eye on. Really? There are not many, like, top guys on the brand for him to feud with. You can run back Matt Riddle, I suppose. I mean, suppose the last time they competed, he did beat Seth. Odyssey Jones was drafted to Raw in the supplemental draft. He's here listed on the page. but I don't think he's actually debuted yet. You want to see Jones from NXT? Though that would be funny if I was just being like, oh yeah, this NXT guy can feud with him. I want AJ to win the title. This is one of my picks. I can get with that, Gibby. And the thing is, they kind of are shy to put the belt on Rollins. I do understand. He debuted NXT into it. For all things he did. He really did. Oh, that's going back. The dying days of 205 Live. Yeah, before it got rebranded as Level Up. So yeah, I get you. I honestly want AJ to have another world title run too. You know, I loved his year-long world title run, even though half of it was spent with people being like, he should drop it to this person, then this person, then this person. But he's a great world champion, and I would want to see him have one more run with it. And you see this, I have a contradicting point I'll get to, but I also think that would be a good thing to have AJ move back over to Raw, possibly with the OC, to be world champion, and then you can maybe spin off the feud into a feud with Seth, where Seth will eventually win the title from him. The thing about that, though, is I like OC on SmackDown, and that OC going back to Raw right afterwards would kind of make very little sense in terms of the draft, and would continue to undermine it more so than they already have. But it's make the title feel special. Someone like AJ has the title. I mean, you're right, Gibby, but here's the thing. Seth, out of all the people who faced Roman, is the only person who Roman didn't beat. So that's where Seth is justified in winning the title. Because I get where you're coming from. You can't have the first winner of the championship, be somebody who is lost to Roman. Seth never lost to Roman, and he never got a rematch after. In fact, Seth beat Roman by DQ. Dumb side question, maybe I don't know. A free agent of able to appear on any show. He's just that big of a deal. One roster can't simply contain him. Now, I don't know. That definitely tells me, like, they have a set list of people they want him to work with, but they know that set list of people is spread over both brands, so they just wanted to create this freedom to pull that off. At the very least, maybe there's, like, one or two people they want to work with him on Raw, and then the rest of people are on SmackDown, so they just want to do this free agent thing as to not be like, and he was just traded to SmackDown in August, you know? Didn't Woods beat Roman by DQ also? Technically, but WWE recognizes that as a no contest. That's their way of saying that. That's their way of getting around that. And technically, I see where they're coming from. I find that to be justifiable, even if it does feel a little bullshitty. But it's a definite distinction, because like the way that, I don't know. I'd have to look up how that match ended again, because that was on SmackDown. Whereas Roman Reigns picked up a chair and whopped Seth Rollins. Like, that was distinctly giving up the match. And even in the case of, if you're putting Seth Rollins and Xavier Woods in that same category, you still can't really justify putting Xavier Woods in that world title picture, just because of how he has been treated as a star since then. But I would, not for nothing, I'd love that. I think Woods needs to get his moment. We need to get our trifecta of New Day moments, you know? I firmly believe that is a mistake WWE cannot afford to make. One day we do need to get a Xavier Woods world title reign. But as it stands right now, you could not put him in a world title picture before Summer's End and convince me that he'd win it. Or that he would be believable as the champion. I'd be supporting him as champion, make no mistake. But I know a lot of people would be like, this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't make sense, or I don't buy it, you know? So yeah, I think, but that being said, if you wanted to go outright the route of people who have not interacted with Roman, AJ is a good shout, and I can get behind that. Because at the very least, even if you have people who have faced Roman then mingle with the world title picture, the first world champion is not a consulate winner. You know? So, I'm with that. Ray was there before, he was happy winning King of the Ring, and that was what he wanted to do. Yeah, and I love that for him. I just hate that WWE went out of their way to take that away from him. They were like, all right, you've been king for like 6 weeks. Now we're going to have Roman stomp your crown and sit on your corpse, and then you'll never be seen as king again. They had a song made and everything. Like, really? Sadness. So I think we've covered some nice ground today, y'all. Yeah, between Collision, Randy Orton, world title. Woods is still technically king of the ring. Yep. And it's funny because Night of Champions coming up. That was originally supposed to be King and Queen of the Ring, which admittedly is a hard sell for a pay-per-view name. But this was supposed to be a show surrounding those two tournaments. And it wasn't going to be the Queen's Crown. It was going to be Queen of the Ring. So has me a little salty that got changed out for this Night of Champions that isn't even going to spiritually represent Night of Champions in the fact that it was supposed to be every championship was defended. And not for nothing, there's only like 6 main roster world titles. Well, 6 main roster championships now. So, never mind, there's more. There's the women's tag, men's world. Okay, so there's, 7, 8, whatever. I would call it the Royal Crowning. That's great. That's a great name. The Royal Crowning, or yes. Rulers of the Ring, even, would be a good one. I'd like to think. Late brunch of some champions, I guess. That's what I'm saying. Like, in fact, as it stands, we have the Undisputed Tag Title match where we're going to have Roman and... what's his name? Roman and... Solo. Wow, I was blanking on his name there. Solo's awesome, too. I feel bad. I'm just bad with names, but that always feels like an excuse when I forget someone's name. Roman and Solo versus Sammy and Kevin for the tag titles. Really going back and forth on who I think is going to win that. Check out the Discord for pay-per-view predictions as we are coming up on this heavy weekend for pay-per-views. Solo! Y'all see on SmackDown last night how Roman, when he was about to storm out on the Usos, he bumped Solo and he was like, my bad, kind of thing. And then left, he was like, I'm not trying to disrespect you. Because he's out here trying to isolate the Usos. He doesn't want to, but he needs some backing in the process of that isolation, you know? So, I think that'll be fun. But then we have, Roman, who will be on his 1,000th day as Universal Champion, not defending his world titles. And yeah, I get it. That's incomplete. Some people have, some people don't care for. But I still stand here, defiant, frustrated that he's not defending that championship. We're getting a new world champion being crowned there. Are there... Intercontinental title match. So yeah, some champions. Maybe we'll get Bobby versus Austin Theory thrown together on next week. Yes, you know what? That's right. That's a great point, Gibby. Because Solo isn't Roman's guy. It's almost, if nothing else, like Roman is the eyes of the elders, because that is something that's not considered enough. Roman still has a higher power, in a way, to answer to, and that is the elders of the tribe. He is the ruler. He is the chief. But if the elders cast you away, you're not still the chief, unless you can turn everyone against the elders. Who's going to turn against the elders in this setting? No, that's an absolute great shout to end on, Gibby. I really appreciate you being here, fam. I appreciate you all being here. Dara, Craig, Zoe, Cam, thank you all for swinging by. Those others as well who have swung by. I'm going to scroll up because I hate when I don't mention Rally. Thank you for swinging by and chatting with us a bit. Devin as well. Y'all, I appreciate you so much, because this show was something that I've been sitting on for like months now, but have just been scared to launch with it, because I'm like, what if I come on here to talk with chat and there is no chat to talk with? That's why I bring my own talking points in the case of that. But this could have ended up being like a 20-minute podcast where I'm like, well, I said everything I need to say, bye, and, and then it never happened again. So thank you so much for helping this happen. This might not be the permanent time slot. Do keep an eye on the WatchMania Discord. I asked before, but it got buried under a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to ask again, what is the preferred time slot for everybody? Do feel free to vote for more than one time slot if it works for you, because I want to find something that's going to get as much engagement as possible, get the conversation going as much as possible. And I will try to have my bearings a little bit more in future installments of the show. This is a good fun. And sorry if I got dumber side. No, not at all. You see, the nature of this show, in a way, is going to encourage being sidetracked. And some people may not like that, but that's why I build this show as for the WatchMania community, as opposed to just for anybody, just because I know by default not everybody's going to be into us jumping back and forth between topics and all that. But I'm glad it was fun. I'm glad y'all enjoyed. Do leave a thumbs up if you haven't already. Do keep an eye on this space tomorrow. There may or may not be a 2K23 stream on this channel. But other than that, what you can count on is going to be Dynamite and Rampage Watchalongs in this next week, as well as next weekend is going to be the Afternoon of Champions, the Late Brunch of Champions watch along, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. BST, and it's going to be Double or Nothing the following day, as well as Battleground. But Battleground, whatever. We'll watch that on your own time. We'll find some other way to watch on the Discord. Double or Nothing's the focus of this space. Come then. And we'll be doing pay-per-view predictions for our new predictions league on the WatchMania Discord. Do check that out as well. See if it's something you're interested in. It'll be fun. Trust me. And you can win prizes. You can, not like super expensive prizes, but it's some fun stuff. Anyways, cheers. Thank y'all so much for hanging out. Y'all have a good afternoon, good weekend.